English Language Learners, also known as ELL or EL, by Amy Horton for ELPA 6454, Policy, Power, and Politics in Education, November 5, 2015. Even though the United States Constitution is vague, there are specific federal, state, and local laws, policies, and procedures in place to guide the educational process to ensure that all individuals have access to an adequate education. The U.S. Constitution does ensure equal opportunity under the law, which can be readily applied to education. The 14th Amendment provides that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Due to the globalization of the world market and a need for the necessary workforce, the United States has experienced an extended period of constant influx of migrating workers from other countries. From agricultural laborers to skilled professionals, these individuals, along with their families, move to America and settle. Many of these families have limited or even non-English speaking members who will need additional services in order to function fully as part of society. Federal legislation such as Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 has been created to protect and support these migrants. It states that no person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Therefore, all children in the United States qualify for educational services, whether they are American citizens or not. State legislation in union with this federal law quickly followed. Tennessee specifically followed suit with the state-level version of the Civil Rights Act in 1964 and later amended in 1995 by Chapter 381 of the Public Acts. This document established state and local policies and procedures for ensuring that these migrant students receive an adequate education under the law. In Tennessee, each district is responsible for designing its own Limited English Proficiency (LEP) program, having its resources effectively implemented, and providing its program is effective or under modification by regular evaluations. English as a Second Language (ESL) programs are endorsed and are to be taught by ESL certified teachers. Furthermore, if programs are not available in the student's home school, the district must provide transportation to a place where services are offered. The U.S. Supreme Court also ruled in favor of a child's access to free and appropriate public education, regardless of the lack of documentation of the parent or guardian, under Plyer v. Doe in 1982. Schools were required to provide the necessary educational support for undocumented and non-citizen students. Under this Supreme Court ruling, schools cannot require migrant families to present a Social Security number, specific birth certificate documents, or residency documentation to register for school. There should also be accommodations for immunizations. The lack of a Social Security card, birth certificate, school records, and immunizations cannot keep a migrant child from registering for school. Every attempt should be made to support the parent in completing the requirements, but they cannot keep the student from registering or beginning classes. More recently, the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001 was established to further support all students in education. Of major concern was that of achievement gaps of subgroups of students based on disability, race, nationality, and socioeconomic status. Particularly, Part C, Education of Migratory Children, details the federal efforts to ensure the decreasing disparity of the achievement of migrant children as compared to other subgroups of students. No Child Left Behind refers to an English language learner as a student whose difficulties in speaking, reading, writing, or understanding English may be sufficient to deny the individual the ability to meet the state's proficient level of achievement on state assessments. the ability to successfully achieve in classrooms where the language of instruction is English, or the opportunity to fully participate in society. The purpose of the program is to support high quality and comprehensive educational programs for migratory children to help reduce the educational disruptions and other problems that result from repeated moves, ensure migratory children who move among the states are not penalized in any manner, ensure migratory children receive full and appropriate educational services, design programs to help migratory children overcome educational disruption, cultural and language barriers, social isolation, various health-related problems, and other factors. Also, to ensure that migratory children benefit from state and local systemic reforms. Therefore, Tennessee created a companion piece of legislation to not only support the efforts of No Child Left Behind at the state level, but also qualify for federal funds tied to such reform. Under this section, ELL students are identified using the Home Language Survey. Parents are asked to answer the following 3 questions. 1. What was the first language your child learned to speak? 2. What language is spoken by the child the most outside of school? And 3. What language is spoken most in the home? If any of the answers to these questions would be different than English, the school must then assess the student using the TELPA, the Tennessee English Language Placement Assessment. If a student scores 1 or 2 on this particular test, they must receive a minimum of 1 hour of ESL instruction per day. Students who score in the 3 to 4 range do not typically receive services, but they are kept on consult for at least 2 years. A student who scores a 5 is either exited from the program or does not qualify for entry into such a program. Also included under this law, ELL students must take yearly assessments in English language arts, math, science, and social studies. However, students cannot be failed or retained based on their language abilities. These ELL students must be allowed to participate in any extracurricular activities and special programs. Any pertinent information must be translated in the native language for any parents, guardians of ELL students. Currently, No Child Left Behind is facing expiration. In order to continue the educational reforms set in motion under the original act, there must be a transition to a new act. One option carefully being considered is the ESEA, Elementary and Secondary Education Act, reauthorization proposal. Under this proposal, the federal government would enact and continue certain requirements to support the education of migrant children. Along with these requirements, the federal government would also provide funds for individual states through several grants to support the program. In order for individual states to get these highly competitive grants, they would be required to establish new criteria to ensure consistent statewide identification of students as English learners, and to determine eligibility, placement, and duration of programs and services based on the state's valid and reliable English language proficiency assessment, implement a system to evaluate the effectiveness of language instruction educational program, and to provide information on the achievement of subgroups of English learners to drive better decisions by school districts for program improvement, and to support districts in selecting effective programs. Based on the data collected by the National Center for Educational Statistics, there were over 4.4 million students participating in English language programs in the 2013-14 school year. According to the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition, the number of English language learners, specifically in Tennessee, has risen over 200% between 1997 and 2008. The Tennessee Department of Education reported that there were 45,805 students identified as ELL in public schools in Tennessee in 2014-15. The percentage of students in Tennessee considered ELL was about 4.6%. Although this may be considered a small percentage of students overall, there are certainly enough students involved for the state to consider them as a subgroup for statistical analysis. While the majority of these students speak Spanish as their first language, other languages such as Arabic, Vietnamese, Somali, and Chinese were included in that total. In order to follow the federal and state mandates for ELL students, Tennessee's Department of Education has developed English learner programs that are implemented as full English inclusion. These students are not placed in separate classrooms isolated from English-speaking students. Instead, ELL students are expected to spend the majority of the school day with English-speaking peers in full English immersion. Typically, these ELL students receive some pull-out instruction using an ESL teacher and/or service, in which students work on building basic English language conversational skills for a small part of the day. Tennessee ELL students are assessed using the WIDA, World Class Instructional Design and Assessment Consortium, English Language Proficiency Standards. There are currently 27 states that follow the standards, assessments, and professional development outlined by WIDA. The following standards were developed by the WIDA Consortium in 2007. Standard 1, Social and Instructional Language. Standard 2, the Language of Language Arts. Standard 3, the Language of Mathematics. Standard 4, the Language of Science. And Standard 5, the Language of Social Studies. There are 6 levels of English language proficiency described under WIDA. Students at level 1 are entering proficiency. A sample expectation would be that they might be able to produce some words in English. At level 2, students are beginning proficiency. They are able to create short phrases or sentences. At level 3, students are developing proficiency. They can write sentences and also edit and revise their work based on teacher feedback. At level 4, students are expanding proficiency. These students are able to write, edit, and revise not only on feedback by the teacher, but also their peers. At level 5, students are bridging proficiency. At this level, students are able to self-assess editing to produce a final piece. At level 6, students are reaching proficiency. These students are able to understand English, both conversational and academic, at the same level as native English-speaking students. No Child Left Behind requires schools to assess ELL students yearly in regards to their English proficiency. These levels 1 through 6 are assessed through the Access Test. As students are assessed, they move up levels. As the students reach a new level, they receive fewer and fewer supports from the ESL teacher. Eventually, these students are expected to integrate completely in the regular education classroom. While these students are reaching levels 4 through 6 may appear to be functioning at a higher level in their English proficiency, it is important to remember that ELL students are fighting 2 battles. First, these students are working hard to grasp functional language, also known as the everyday conversational language. Statistics show that students need between 1 and 3 years to reach grade level proficiency in this area. There is a second proficiency that should also be considered. This proficiency is with academic English. This refers to the content-specific academic language that students need to understand and use correctly in academic courses such as math, science, English, and social studies. Statistics show that students need 5 to 7 years to reach grade level proficiency in this area, based on the work of Collier, Cummins, and Carrier. Since conversational English is used daily, it is grasped more quickly. Academic language is built from grade level to grade level and less often used than conversational English. Therefore, it takes longer for the students to become proficient. There may be also several gaps in academic vocabulary due to multiple transitions if the student and his or her family have moved around frequently. While Tennessee and many other states have chosen to provide a complete immersion program for ELL, there is some research supporting the effectiveness of a hybrid immersion model. Through bilingual two-way immersion programs, students who speak English as their native language, as well as ELL students, are grouped together and receive a combined or bilingual education in each of the academic courses, including English, math, science, and social studies. Depending on the grade level, both students receive instruction in both English and Spanish. For example, students who are ELL receive 100% instruction in Spanish in the early grades, and then begin to taper off as instruction in English increases with each grade level. By 5th grade, these students receive instruction 60% of the time in English and 40% of the time in Spanish. Conversely, students who are native English speakers begin kindergarten with 40% of the time speaking English and 60% of the time speaking Spanish. The amount of Spanish instruction gradually increases with each grade level. Statistics from a study conducted by Marion, Shook, and Schroeder in 2013 showed that both groups of students, both native English speaking and ELL, involved in the bilingual TWI program outperformed those students in a traditional immersion program in both math and reading. While there are many variables that should be considered, this innovative model that provides foreign language enrichment for native English speakers and remedial support for ELL is worth consideration as schools continue to adapt and reform their ESL programs. A primary goal of schools is to ensure that ELL students are provided the educational opportunities as outlined in federal, state, and local policy. One way schools can support these students and their families is through the use of Epstein's model of parent and community involvement, based on the work of Epstein, Coates, Salinas, Sanders, and Simon, 1997, and Hill and Flynn in 2006. This research-based model has been found effective with many types of students, including ELL students. Basically, there are 6 types of involvement. First type is parenting, where we want to help all families establish home environments to support children as students. 2, communicating. We want to design effective forms of school-to-home and home-to-school communications about school programs and children's progress. The third is volunteering. We want to recruit and organize parent help and support. Fourth, learning at home. We want to provide information and ideas to families about how to help students at home with homework and other curriculum-related activities, decisions, and planning. Fifth is decision making. We want to include parents in school decisions and in the development of parent leaders and representatives. And 6, collaborating with the community. We want to identify and integrate resources and services from the community to strengthen school programs, family practices, and student learning and development. Through a careful combination of these 6 types of parent and community involvement, the schools can provide the necessary support for these migrant children and their families. To strengthen and streamline these types of parent and community involvement, Epstein, Coates, Salinas, Sanders, and Simon suggests a 3-year parent and community involvement plan for the school to follow. Within this plan would be an outline of the activities that the school plans to implement in each of the 6 areas outlined in the steps I just mentioned. The plan should begin with a short description of the type of parent and community involvement, along with a vision statement of where the school would ultimately like to be. Following the vision statement, the school would outline small and specific steps for implementation of activities for each of the 3 years. These items may be introductory or continuance and building from year to year. Within this plan, the school would have a coherent and methodical approach to providing parent and community involvement. Within the classroom, there are multiple opportunities for content area teachers to reach these English language learners and build proficiency in both conversational and academic language English. Through immersion, these ELL students are saturated with print and verbal English throughout the school day. Unfortunately, the majority of classroom teachers have little or no educational background with ELL students. Many feel ill-prepared to work with these particular students. To improve the overall confidence and effectiveness of the content area teachers, researchers such as Carrier found that there are 3 key issues teachers should consider. First, she believes that we should begin with the teacher's understanding of the 3 key issues. First, the amount of time required for second language acquisition. 2, the 2 jobs that ELLs are doing in the classroom. And 3, the use of multiple modes of input and output. Content area teachers need to know that English acquisition does not occur overnight. It can take years for many students to develop the necessary English skills. Classroom teachers also need to consider the 2 types of vocabulary development that students are learning, academic and conversational. Finally, teachers should consider different instructional strategies and student assessments that they can use in their classrooms that will be most effective for ELL students. Through this lens, teachers can set realistic and developmentally appropriate goals for ELL students. Once the classroom teacher has a better understanding of these 3 integral issues, proper planning for ELL students may begin. Teachers should work closely with the ESL teacher to communicate and collaborate on a regular basis. The ESL teacher's role is to support the understanding of the academic vocabulary being learned in the content classroom while also improving conversational English. The classroom teacher's responsibility is to provide the student with appropriate materials to engage and challenge the student. Carrier is especially critical of simplistic worksheets that require lower level thinking skills. Instead, she recommends word walls, sentence starters, condensing curriculum, graphic organizers, and the utilization of multiple modes of teaching strategies and student assessment opportunities. For example, students can use a graphic organizer to categorize information and then create a PowerPoint presentation to share what they have learned, instead of a writing-intensive essay or a reading-heavy and lengthy multiple-choice test. As we continue to grow highly dependent on technology, it is only fitting that technology be used to enhance the learning for ELL students. Brozek and Duckworth believe utilizing and combining graphics, video, and audio can address varied styles of learning in a more effective way and be a tremendous support to English language learners. 2010, page 10. The technology can enhance student presentations with pictures, video, and sound clips, as well as text. ELL students can use programs such as PowerPoint or Keynote to build an outline guide for subject-specific presentations. Technology is also an excellent tool for ELL students. They can use Google searches to quickly translate unfamiliar words and find multiple sources for information. Students can use the text-to-speech option that will provide them with scaffold reading while they enhance their reading and fluency skills. Additionally, there are multiple apps that enhance student learning. Since many ELL students struggle with the verbal and written English, technology as a tool can be very beneficial. In conclusion, English language learners are an important group of students within the educational system. Through policy development and reform, state and district emphasis, and research-based classroom practice, these students deserve the same amount of focus and support as any other student in the United States. By carefully examining policies and procedures and providing these students with research-based effective instruction, these students can meet the demands of English proficiency.